New sentencing guidelines are being drafted in the UK to help judges determine how much time someone should serve if they commit certain public order offenses, and this includes what they call stirring up racial hatred. And the most alarming bit of information from this is that you can actually serve a harsher penalty if you have a large social media following, that simply because people know who you are more worthy of punishment. But as with all of these cases, who gets to determine what is stirring up racial hatred? And if these guidelines come into effect, will it make issues like the Count Dankula case look like child's play? Before we get started, make sure you pop over to patreon.com/Timcast and click Become a Patron. There are many different tiers to choose from. Most notably is Tier 1. At $10 per month, you get access to behind-the-scenes photos and videos, bonus commentary when available, so please consider supporting my journalism by becoming a patron today. From The Independent, people convicted of hate crimes could get harsher sentences if they have large number of social media followers. Sentencing Council opens consultation on new guidelines for public order offenses, including stirring up racial hatred. Hate criminals could face tougher sentences if they are in a position of authority or have the power to influence a large number of people under new guidelines proposed for judges. The Sentencing Council for England and Wales has drafted the changes for public order offenses, which includes stirring up hatred against people on the grounds of race, religion, or sexual orientation. Judges will be able to increase punishments for offenders who are in a position of trust, authority, or influence and abuses their position to stir up hatred, such as a politician or figurehead, and anyone who intends to incite serious violence or is persistent in their activity. Offenses such as inciting racial hatred through words, behavior, broadcasting, or publishing written material are punishable with a prison sentence of up to 7 years, and judges must decide what term to apply. This gets scary when you consider the case of Count Dankula. Count Dankula's video about his Nazi pug was not intended to offend anybody, and in fact, if it was going to offend anybody, it would offend Nazis, because Count Dankula said they were the least adorable thing that he could think of. And the courts decided that context was irrelevant because what he said was offensive. And ultimately he was arrested, charged, convicted, and sentenced to pay a fine of £800. Now most people would say that that fine, it's no big deal. Pay the £800. But it does set a dangerous precedent in the UK. Now we're hearing that people could face up to 7 years if they're found guilty of inciting racial hatred. That's a huge step up from an £800 fine. And I'll tell you exactly why this is scary. Even when you consider Count Dankula, and you know the courts will interpret your actions for you, the media does the same thing. The media will say this is what you believe, regardless of what you actually say. But we have another shocking example of when facts were determined to be hate speech. From Russia Today, free speech row erupts on Twitter as Tommy Robinson suspended after post about grooming gangs. And this was published the 3rd of March, 2018. According to the story, think tank Quilliam Foundation detailed in a report released last month that 84% of people convicted of child grooming gang offenses since 2005 were from an Asian background. The report found 222 of 264 of people convicted of specific grooming gang crimes were Asian, while 18 were listed as white and 22 as black. Robinson has reportedly received a 7-day suspension after inflating the number of people found to have been involved in grooming. Majid Nawaz tweeted in Tommy's defense saying, "Tommy and I argue lots, but here he's quoting a fact. Twitter support are confused. Type 2 are 85% white. Type 1, gangs targeting girls, are 84% Muslim compared to just 7% of the population." Now, I know that there are people who dispute these facts. They say that the findings are inaccurate, but that's besides the point. Tommy wasn't posting hate. Tommy was posting what he saw as statistics about an issue he thought was very important. And Twitter deemed it hate speech, and he got suspended for it. Now, since then, he's actually been banned entirely from Twitter. But the point is still there, that you could actually post facts, or what you think are facts, and someone else will determine that you are trying to push hate speech. In which case, would a court say this is stirring up racial hatred? Even though Muslims are not a race, many people on the left say it's still racism. Many people try to politicize statistics and findings. Many findings and statistics are entirely political. Often, groups are funded by special interests to kind of find what they want to find. So it's really hard to know for sure if what you are posting or reading is factually accurate. It's a big challenge. But then we have to ask ourselves, what if someone has good intentions? They see a statistic and they say, I'm going to post this. If they're wrong, should they still be punished? Should they be punished at all for having a conversation about race, gender, national origin, identity, etc.? Someone can be critical of these ideas and they want to talk about it, and maybe they're not trying to incite hate, but trying to address real problems within our society. But also what is very alarming about this is that it includes politicians or figureheads, but politician is the important part. If a politician notices there's a trend among a specific group of people that needs to be addressed and brings it up, is that inciting racial hatred? Is a court going to say to a politician, you are guilty of a crime and you are facing 7 years in prison? In which case, politics is going to become nightmarish because the courts will overrule the actual political discourse and then problems can't get solved. Now, it's important to point out that last year it was reported Count Dankula could face a year in jail for his Nazi dog video. And this story from NewsHub. And it says a YouTube star called Count Dankula could spend a year in prison if he's found guilty of a hate crime after a video he posted was deemed anti-Semitic and saw him arrested by police. So prison was always on the table. But it seems like these guidelines are ramping that up to an extreme degree. Political discourse is being threatened by people who will not allow the free exchange of ideas, and that is particularly alarming. Can I just point out, there's something really strange about a group of people calling those who would support free speech fascist. Because isn't a tenet of fascism suppressing or controlling thought and ideas? Fascism is defined as, loosely, authoritarian nationalism. So any group that would seek to exert authority to imprison, arrest, or harm an individual because of their ideas is expressing a certain authoritarian tendency. And if the government can determine what your intentions are and what your context is, then the government is becoming a bit authoritarian. So why is it that those who are claiming to oppose fascism, to oppose authoritarianism, are the ones that tend to support policies like this? It beats the hell out of me. Something's not right, I guess. But there's another thing I wanted to point out coming from a hacker perspective. You could have someone on Twitter posting things you don't like. You can buy them Twitter followers very, very easily. And then overnight, they now have 100,000 followers or however much you wanted to spend. All of a sudden now, are the courts going to care that they're influential? Just because someone has social media followers doesn't mean they're actually influential. But this is part of the consideration, at least according to these news reports, that having a large social media presence makes you more worthy of punishment. You can actually exploit the system by simply buying followers for someone and then accusing them of having influence. It is a very strange future we are looking at. It's almost kind of like Black Mirror, where the amount of followers you have is slowly becoming some kind of social merit system. Think about that. A court actually saying, well, I was going to give him 6 months in jail, but because you have 20,000 followers, we're going to do 8 months in jail. Like, for some reason, followers equal some kind of point system. You couldn't really quantify that back in the day. You couldn't determine how influential someone was. So how would you argue it? Well, this person's appeared on TV a couple times. Are they influential? I don't really know. But today, we can count how many people follow them on social media. And apparently that's good enough. Combine that with a court system that's going to decide context for you or tell you context is irrelevant. And I hate to say it, guys, over in the UK, you're looking at a pretty bleak future, at least when I'm reading these stories. And to everybody who's not in the UK, you're in the US, keep in mind that things that happen in the UK do often happen here maybe 10 or so years later. Take, for instance, this story from Breitbart. Twitter is banning conservatives for posting facts. While I tend to take Breitbart with a grain of salt, there is this interesting tidbit. It says, there are now concerns the accounts of American users are also being shut down at the request of European governments. Nick Monroe, an independent journalist based in America, says he was banned from the platform after he began an investigation of Tell Mama, an anti-Islamophobia organization based in the UK. It says the Home Affairs Select Committee, made up of lawmakers from all British political parties, has previously pressured Twitter into suspending accounts accused of Islamophobia by Tell Mama. Faith Matters, the group that runs Tell Mama, has previously provided evidence to the committee and has been referenced during committee discussions of online hate speech. Monroe says Twitter did not inform him of why his account was banned, nor highlight any particular rule-violating tweet. Breitbart News reached out to Twitter for comment. A spokeswoman said the company doesn't comment on individual accounts for privacy and security reasons. Monroe's account, which appeared to be permanently banned, was restored without explanation after Breitbart News reached out to Twitter for comment and after Monroe publicized the story on his blog. So we better be vigilant, otherwise we could face similar policy. But let me know what you think in the comments below. We'll keep the conversation going. Stay tuned. New videos every day at 4 p.m. You can follow me on Twitter at Timcast. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all then.